Und jetzt will ich nicht weiter aufhalten. I switch to English now to announce the panel. I think the moderator, the host of the panel, André Alpa, is already in position, and our international guests and keynote speakers, we gather them all together since we are quite proud we have them here. They made the long trip, so we decided they are the ones that we want to get the most out of, and get the most out of the time and miles they made to come here. So André will try to do that and ask them some questions. I think we take a half hour to really squeeze the rest out of our speakers and experts here. And then after this last half hour, there will be sausages, there will be sushi, there will be get-together and music. So some more information, 30 more minutes, and then let the fun begin. Okay, André and the speakers.
All right, did you have fun so far? Ooh, okay, sounds good. So I have some questions, but it would be best if you take the opportunity to take your questions to the speakers. Is there anyone who dares already, or do I need one, up front to warm up everything? I'll just go ahead. All right, so if you look at the non-display spendings that you're doing right now, what's the split amongst the different PPC channels? Like how many percent is Google AdWords and how many percent is the rest? And how do you think that split will change over time during the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Who wants to start?
Philipp, brauchst du das Mikro? Danke.
I'll just start with a really boring answer. So it's about, in the US, Bing accounts for more than it does for you guys, obviously. So I'd say it's about 70% Google, 20% Bing, and 10% other, which includes like different remarketing platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn. And what we do is we typically, with our clients, work, Google is the starting point, and Bing is kind of a standard in the US, so we'll always work on Bing where we work on Google unless the client explicitly doesn't want it. And then the other stuff is more like, hey, a new initiative, we could probably gain something here. We feel like our AdWords account's in really good standing. We're doing like ad testing, but there's nothing revolutionary to do there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start doing like Facebook ads or retargeting, and we're going to get a specific budget from our client to maybe test it, and then if it works, it becomes that 10%, or maybe like 20% for them. But if it doesn't, then it's kind of 0% for a few months. So that's where we are. I don't know if you guys want to give your breakdowns.
Google's 90% of search traffic in the UK. The problem is the time to set up Bing means that unless the client is spending quite a reasonable size, it's not worth doing it. So for most of our clients, well, I guess 30 or so clients, only 5 are doing Bing. LinkedIn is great, but it's quite expensive, and it's obviously only B2B. And we've been playing with Facebook Exchange through AdRoll, and that's had varying success. So I'd say 95% Google.
Do you think it's going to stay that way for the next 3 to 5 years, or what do you think can get a bigger share of everything?
I hope not. I hope it's going to be less.
No, I think you'll see the shift. I mean, we see the shift into Facebook, and we see the shift into remarketing. I think the other thing that's pointed out, it's kind of an intra-Google shift that people need to take, is PLAs, right? PLAs, I know we tend to group Google into one category, but PLAs are just exploding. We saw a huge rise last year during the retail season, and I expect it to be even bigger this year with shopping campaigns and stuff like that. So I don't think you can forget about PLAs. Bing, as we saw, has announced PLAs. And then, I expect, this is more of a US phenomenon, but I expect Amazon to kind of step up their ad presence in the US, specifically vis-a-vis some sort of product ad type feature.
Anybody else wants to comment?
Sure. So I'll break it down. I've seen these trends for years, and it seems to be stable. So in the US, at least what I see is if you look at impression share and spend share, it's different. So impression share, you'll find Google about 70 to 75%, and Yahoo Bing is about 25%. But spend share, it's about an 80-20 split between Google and Yahoo Bing. It's been pretty stable for a long time. Now, as was alluded to, PLAs was like, just exploded. And basically, in one quarter, the Google spend on PLA was more than Bing altogether. Just one quarter, in retail. Just because PLAs are about 17 to 25% of spend in retail right now. And in quarter 4, where it's Christmas season in the US and in the UK, it really takes off. In Germany, let me see, 95% to 97% of spend is on Google. It's always been that way. And I don't see it changing very soon, partly because of the users, but partly because of marketers like us. Because if you are managing your ad spend, do you want to spend, how much time do you want to spend on 3% of your budget? So while the ROI is there, many marketers are like, well, it's not worth my time spending it, so it's stable there. So Bing is strongest in finance for some reason. It's always been that way. Because when Yahoo Bing merged together, Yahoo was strong in finance for a long time. So there, Google's about 70% of spend. And Google is strongest in retail, where it's about 85% of spend most of the time in the US. And, well, Germany's different. Germany's all Google anyway.
So is there anything that marketers can do to kind of soften this, let's say, one-sidedness of everything? Is there anything that we can do to help diversify? Or is it good for us it's that way because it's simple if we just have to adjust to this one ecosystem mostly? What are your thoughts on that? Can we actually do something about it, or are we just bystanders and that's it? We just take it as it is?
You can search on Bing.com.
I mean, I think, over time, right, I would just add, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but I do, expect things to continue to fragment, right? Whether it's Facebook coming on, whether it's Pinterest, right, in the US, which is, for those of you who don't know, is a rapidly rising news site that sends more traffic to retailers than Facebook and Twitter combined. They're developing an ad model. And what's next, right? I mean, 5 years ago, we didn't think Facebook was going to be able to challenge Google, and now we're starting to see some of the seeds of that. So, as someone who, back in the day, when Google bought DoubleClick, was kind of, somewhat upset from, thinking I'd have a single source of traffic when I was at eBay. I think you continually see fragmentation, and, I think that trend will increase over time.
I think that we have to go far beyond just looking at search as one channel. I think we are living in if people are buying through multiple channels, it doesn't make sense to look at one channel like search on its own silo. So I'll give some examples. So the way to think of it is consumers are looking for, as marketers, you want to build an awareness with consumers, then engage them, and then convert them. So it's a 1-2-3 punch, right? Build an audience, engage with the audience, and convert the audience. We did some research, and it's very interesting to find that we found that Twitter, for example, so think of it as we did a research on a retailer, so we're trying to see what drives conversions. But you can't look at conversions from the last click or the last point of contact. You've got to see what is building audiences and how those audiences research on site and research offline or word of mouth, and then how that becomes conversions. TV, interestingly, is active on all three stages. It helps drive awareness, it helps people come on site and do research. It also helps with conversions. Search is very powerful at the bottom of the funnel. Very good for existing audiences at the last part of the funnel. Twitter is very good at building awareness. So they're all active at different points of the funnel. And if you're looking at the last stage of the funnel, at the narrowest point, very valuable audiences, and trying to maximize it, it's only that much efficiency you will get. You have to think multi-channel. Even within the same channel, right? You look at PLAs, for example. Did you know that 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 clicks on PLA is assisted? So the average path length on PLA is significantly higher than on regular search ads. Because when you click on a picture, you're getting an audience earlier in the sales funnel. So oftentimes, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 PLA ads will convert on a search ad. So search seems to be much better than PLA ads. So there's all these nuances. It's multi-channel, it's multi-device, it's multi-ad format world we live in. You can't just think just in terms of pure search. You have to go across channels, and that's how you're going to get your efficiency. The fact that the #1 search engine in the world, Google, is advertising on TV says something about it.
What can we do to help diversify the area we're working in?
To a large extent, I don't care. Like, I don't feel the pressing need to diversify for its own sake. I'm thinking, am I going to be safe in the future when there's a massive change? Am I going to have those platform skills? Am I going to have a presence on future channels that we don't know about? But at the moment, I kind of don't care. I don't mind where my traffic comes from. I care whether my traffic works now. Is it profitable? And when X new channel arrives in the future, will I have the tools to manage it? Yeah, because they'll be wanting to make money out of me. There will definitely be a tool, and the third-party ad tech solutions will want to let me and help me manage it. So whether it comes from Bing or from Google, whether it comes from search or from social, so long as I can manage it and spend my budget effectively, the market can do whatever it wants.
I wouldn't have thought that you would say something like that, because I heard that Google has their own bidding system. With large clients, they're willing to give like even workforce for free. So they're kind of killing your business if you're the agency only doing Google, and they offer their services for free to the big publishers at least. I mean, they're killing your business if you're only relying on them. If you're not the agency that teaches, hey, you can do this and this and this, and I'm kind of your guy in this dark forest that there is of the different opportunities, then probably your business may be in danger. So that's why I thought you're not safe. So that's why I was asking this way.
So, I mean, that is a fair point. And it's not just Google. Every different kind of ad management platform is improving their automation skills to almost say, well, is the agency becoming more redundant? What part does the human play in that? And every different company will have to make their own decision about that. At the moment, we're better at it than Google. That might not be true forever, but we will evolve our skill set to try and add value in some way, or there's no point in us existing as a company, which will affect every agency and every ad management platform that there is. But at the end of the day, at the moment, those marketing agencies control the budgets. So the guys who spend bazillions of pounds, not bazillions, that's an exaggeration, but a lot, on their offline, their billboard, their outdoor, their print, their TV, their digital is being managed by the same agencies. So if Google is going to go up to Group M and say, oh, by the way, we've just made you redundant, that's going to hurt Google. So there's not an enormous amount of motivation for Google to automate an agency's role away, but at the same time, the more they can do to make it easier for a small business to make AdWords work, the more likely they're going to turn into a big budget business in the future and say, well, okay, we need more, where do we go?
I mean, I was at Google when we launched DS3, and I mean, Google has built out an ad tech stack, and you could actually argue they're not coming after the agencies, they're coming after the ad tech platforms. And I think and we see, their pricing, methodologies and so forth. And at the same time, internally at Google, the feeling was that, hey, here comes Facebook, here come these other channels. If we let, the other third-party ad tech platforms control the spend, are they going to send dollars to those other channels? Even before I came to a place like Marin, I thought that was kind of a silly proposition, because an advertiser is going to spend where there's ROI, not where the tech platforms tell them to spend. But I think Google sees an ability to do two things, right? One, they think that they believe that internally with ad tech they can innovate faster than other folks, and then I think two, to the extent they can, at the end of the day, they're a media company, and to the extent that they can tie that to their media platform, there's some strategy there, some synergy there. What I found was really interesting, and this is, I knew the attribution companies were going to get bought, right? Odometry and Visual IQ and Convertro. AOL bought Convertro, and then Google went and bought Odometry, and which I found a very, very unlikely home for those types of companies, because one of the expressions I've always used is like, you don't ask the barber if you need a haircut, right? If Google's telling you your attribution, methodologies, oh yeah, YouTube looks great this quarter, right? You should spend more money on YouTube. So I think those are some of the things that, as you think about their foray into ad tech, you also have to remember that they're a publisher.
I think it's very unlikely that agencies particularly will be forced out, because it's hard enough for us to keep up with all the changes and the amount of investment we have to do in training and everything else just to understand it. The automation part of it is actually a very small part of our day job, and it's just understanding what you need to do. The other thing is, I think the end client is often very suspicious, because everybody knows that Google's there to make Google money. So in the UK, for example, we have a Google helpline, and I've seen the car crashes that they produce in accounts occasionally, and it's all about, a lot of the time, it's about making Google money and not the client money. So that lack of independency means that there's a mistrust, And having somebody independent that can give them advice, even though they pay for it, I think is a much healthier environment. So I think our jobs are going to get more complicated, and they're going to become more reliant on us, not less.
I think, Google is innovating tremendously fast, and if you've been in this industry for a long time, you've seen the pace of innovation really increase. They literally have hundreds of betas and different things that are happening. And so I think that's going to give them an advantage over a lot of the other people that just aren't innovating as quickly. But the one disadvantage that Google has compared to some companies, I think, is around privacy. I think they're so prudent, at least in the US, with privacy, that they're not enabling you to do a lot of the things that we know are possible, like real-time bidding with display. And so a lot of other companies are able to do things. Facebook's doing more interesting things. I think Twitter's on the cusp of doing more interesting things than even Google's doing. And I think that's going to give them a competitive advantage potentially for a little while until Google comes around. But Google's been very prudent with their privacy. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's going to limit some of their success slightly compared to some other people that are more audacious with the things that they're trying to do.
Okay, so probably each of you can share like one experience of being active in a PPC world where you have an experience from either a different language or a different market, like probably something that kind of stuck to your mind that was kind of, I don't know, mind-blowing different than in the US or than what you have expected. There was probably some exotic examples from some entertaining countries, maybe even this one that you're in right now. So can probably each of you share, because I know everyone has some of those in their pockets.
I can start. I remember from my early days at eBay, we used to do a lot of testing on which lines of creatives the users reacted to, first, second, third, and so, whether, changing parameters and such in each line of the ad text unit, people might react to. And we found that in every country in the world except one, people ignored the middle two lines. And the only country that actually made a difference was Germany, because we figured Germans were so thorough that they took the time to read everything.
We had a fashion client, a British fashion client, who wanted to expand into the USA. So in the run-up towards the, was it 2012 elections, they said, okay, we're gonna launch in the US, and we want it to be really kind of British. Like, we want to big up the whole kind of romantic British thing that Americans love so much. So they decided that their theme of their launch was going to be about a tea party. They were thinking in their heads like a nice Buckingham Palace garden party in the run-up to the elections in the US. We pointed out to them this might not be the smartest move that could ever be done. Didn't occur to them at all. And they were like, well, I haven't heard of that, so I don't think it's very important. And that was it. And they launched in the US with 3 big flagship stores across the country with a tea party theme during an election period. And it was the biggest disaster. And literally their international rollout stalled for nearly a year because of their marketing department's inability to read the news.
So I got one that's a little bit about market differences, and it's not as exciting as these guys. But one thing is, so we worked with a UK company that sold phone insurance, right? So like you drop your phone in the toilet and you pay like €5 a month and they'll replace it rather than you have to go buy a €500 phone. Well, in the UK, this works really well, right? Because everyone in the UK, or at least a lot of people, they buy a phone that's no SIM, right? So they buy a no SIM phone and then they buy a SIM card on a contract, and that works, right? Because everyone knows their phone just cost them £500. It's bloody expensive. Well, in the US, no one buys a no SIM phone apart from like a few people who maybe have a Nexus or like 1 or 2 other phones, because the major carriers box everyone out, right? They pretty much don't let you do it, or they make it really hard to do it. So if you want like a Verizon phone, it's like almost impossible to get in the back of there and get your SIM card out. So what happens is because the providers are selling the phones to you like as a part of your monthly contract, they also at the time push really heavily to get you to buy their insurance. So that means like no one thinks to buy insurance who doesn't already buy it through the provider. So basically no one who wants insurance is left at the point when they could go and buy it from a standalone insurer. So that's the kind of thing you got to watch out for. Like the markets are crazy different when you actually think about like some of that stuff. When you just look and you're like, oh yeah, it's phone insurance. Like everyone's going to want phone insurance. But turns out that when you ask a few people, it really doesn't translate at all.
Mark, how do you differently target the French and the English in Canada?
Well, we don't have that many Canadian customers, so I don't really have great stories. I mean, our clients are all over the world, but no, I can't contribute. Sorry.
How do people in the U.S. target the Spanish-speaking market in the U.S.? That's kind of... Supposedly, I mean, some people tell it's 5 to 10% of the inhabitants of the U.S., even though it's not such a popular topic, it seems. U.S. is a single language country, you think?
I mean, at some point, I forgot the year, but it's supposed to be 50% of the U.S. speak Spanish at some point. And it's kind of sad that I think we're not doing it as frequently as we are doing it. One experiment that we started to run, which I'm shocked actually worked, is we're running English language campaigns in a bunch of different countries. And not even for people who target English, and those actually are working fairly well for us. And so things that you would never think of doing, displaying ads in English in Germany for some of our clients are actually working. And so there hasn't been that big push that I think we would expect yet. But that will change. I mean, the Latin agencies in the US are taking off. And it's for that reason. I just don't think a lot of the typical digital agencies have the skill sets internally to be able to do that as well as we'd like to.
There's one interesting thing we found out when we are trying to go for the Spanish-speaking population in the US is that for many of them, the smartphone is their primary computing device. So the smartphone traffic is significantly higher for those demographics than for the other populations. So the campaigns we found were better effective if you go for the smartphone traffic first.
A lot of things that we've seen in the Spanish market as well is the default browser at home might be set to the Spanish language, but that has to do primarily with the parents because it's a first generation. So if you, like we have seen the same thing, we'll display the ads in English, but they'll technically be targeted to, it could be Spanish language group, and they're still gonna respond to it. It's kind of interesting. Not as good as the Tea Party though, that is excellent.
Any other cross-country experiences where you were amazed about the differences? Any other things you can share?
Something comes to mind, actually. So in Canada, you're right, it's a bilingual population. And so if you're a national advertiser, there is a complexity there, and I'm sure it's 10 times worse in Europe. But you can't just have an English-only campaign running. The province of Quebec is French, and most of the population does search in French, and a lot of them don't speak, especially in the regions, do not speak English at all. So it's a complexity that national brands need to address, and a lot of the times it creates difficulties with their agencies who usually will only work in one of the two languages well. They'll say, I can do both, I can do French and English, but the reality is they'll do one really poorly. So it forces agencies to collaborate. So that's something I've seen is creates difficulties, but there's opportunities, I guess, for agencies to work together.
One of the biggest things we found about doing international campaigns is not external about the market, but internal about us. We have a few sort of multilingual and native speakers for a variety of European languages, but we would like to be able to use those guys to essentially say, well, okay, we've got this client, they want to expand to Germany, so can you please build us a German campaign that's analogous to their English language one? And at first they go, yeah, great, that'll be fun. And then after a year, or a year and a half, or 2 years in the agency, they're saying, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I've got my big flagship accounts now. I'm doing more interesting things. I am not a junior account executive who's willing to just build campaigns for everyone else in the team. So we have to continually find multilingual account managers, even though we're not an international agency, and even though we already have them, because as they just develop through their careers, they just can't continue to do that anymore, which makes it very difficult. So our sales team will say, yeah, we've got German, we've got French, we've got Portuguese, and we've got Spanish, and we've got Italian. We kind of do in the company, but we can't use those guys to just be building campaigns for everybody.
We've had to partner with specialists, international partners, in order to do the translation for the same reason as Alistair said. We've only got a French speaker within our agency, and she laughs at some of the stuff that we've tried to do because she said it's not the way you speak locally. A lot of our clients want to do their advertising in English and target multiple languages. So the idea of having the language in the local language is very important because most people do have their browser in the local language, so you definitely need to do that. I think the main issue is a lot of people will do PPC because they don't want to invest the money in their website because it's much more expensive to do SEO in multiple languages. So they test PPC first, but PPC doesn't always work, particularly in the southern European countries, unless the landing page and the whole campaign is in the local language. So we're speaking in English today because you guys are brilliant at speaking English, but do you search in English? You know, you're more likely to search in German, I guess. So you do need to have the site translated as well if you're going to do the multilingual stuff.
Right. From you guys, any more questions that you want to ask the panelists? Well, then we're done. Give a hand to the panelists, please. Okay, so thanks for all the participants, thanks to all the speakers, thanks to all the sponsors. Jetzt gibt's zu essen und zwar einmal dort hinten und hier vorne diese japanischen Spezialitäten, die kommen, glaube ich, so als Flying Finger Buffet drumherum. Und wer es noch nicht gemacht hat, wenn ihr eins von den Zertifikaten wollt von der Hamburg Media School, die gibt's vorne abzuholen an dem Stand. Ich glaube, ich habe alles gesagt.
Eine Information, das Essen hier vorne ist also mehr Nachtisch. Ne? Hier gibt es jetzt nicht für 300 Leute Essen. Das ist absolute Haute Cuisine. Extrem geiles japanisches Essen. Lieber hier erstmal eine Wurst nehmen zum Sattessen, die ist da vorne. Ja? Wurst als Fundament und dann hier Nachtisch sozusagen. Also, genießt den Abend noch. Das war es jetzt vom offiziellen Teil her. Networking. Ich glaube, wir sehen uns wieder, wenn ihr Lust habt. André und ich bleiben am Ball. Rockstars, PPC, OM Cap. Und ja, dann bis bald.
Viel Spaß.